welcome to yet another episode of Vinyl Tales, where we spin tales about vinyl. Today, I have a song for you that is one of the group's most popular songs. But the inspiration for it has nothing to do with what most people think it's about. I'd be willing to bet you're probably one of the masses on this one. In reality, the inspiration for this song comes from something completely different. It's a direction that you just wouldn't expect, and this direction goes on multiple paths because there are multiple, slightly different versions of the origin story. If you want to hear all those versions and then compare the real facts to them, then stick around for a little bit and we'll get into all the details of this fun little story on today's episode of Vinyl Tales. Released as a single on September 8th, 1978, with a B-side track titled Lonely Children, and used as the title track for their second album, we have Foreigner's song Double Vision. Now, before I actually get into the details of the song itself, there's something else I thought I'd throw in real quick first. As you see, I have two things sitting here with me, but normally I only have the one because I only talk about one at a time. That's because of this little piece of information I want to hand out. You see, the original release of this song, within the first less than 2 years that this song came out, it had 3 different versions of the album cover, with 2, maybe 3 different versions of the label on the record itself, depending on what you want to consider different. And so I thought I'd start with that. The first pressing, or the original release, is this one here. It's the one where the pictures are all black and white, but they're all clear and easy to see. Also, the name of the album is printed down here at the bottom, underneath that rectangular picture. On this original release, the first label variant that came with it was actually a 2-tone label. The top half was green and the bottom half was orange. Later that same year, so still 1978, they repressed the album and released it again. Well, this album was rated 7 times platinum, so of course it was popular. They ran out and they had to make more to sell more. And the second pressing had a different album cover than this first one here, and a different label. The second pressing is similar to this one, where this background picture has been grayed out with a funky beige color. And the rectangular picture at the bottom was given a bluish tint to it. Also, the name of the album was moved up to directly underneath the name of the band instead of hidden down there at the bottom. Now this one also had a different label as well. because of the closeness of the release of the first and second pressings, the second label style can sometimes be found in the first pressing jacket. The second label variant is, instead of being two-tone, it's all silver, and the writing on it and all the details are in a green color. It's a green ink. Also, if you look in the dead wax, that spot just right next to the label, scratched in that dead wax spot is a little message that says Heart Pogo. He's just someone that had something to do with the creation of the album. Now, this message is only available on those second pressings. Now, a few months later, so now we're in 1979, the album was still doing great. It was still selling out, and so they once again repressed it and reissued it. And so we were given the third pressing of this album with yet another album cover in a year and a half to 2 years. The third pressing is actually this one in my hand. You see, it's got that same grayed or beiged out background photo as the second one. Only the difference with this one is that rectangular picture on the bottom. Instead of having a blue tint, it's got a purplish tint to it. And like I said, that Heart Pogo isn't etched into the wax on this third pressing. It's only on that second pressing there. Now I thought I'd throw that in there real quick because I've seen some people that say something along the lines of how when this album first came out, they only grabbed the one with the blue tint picture, or maybe they grabbed this one, thinking that was the original release, only to find this one later and think that's a reissue, and go many years thinking the opposite way of the way they were actually released. When in reality, this one here is the original. The one like this that has the blue tinted picture is the second, and this one is the third pressing, but they were all released within the span of about a year and a half, give or take a few months. But now, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into those stories, why won't you? If you ask most people that have heard this song, Double Vision by Foreigner, they'll tell you the same thing. The vast majority of people that have heard this song think that it's about drugs and other unsavory actions, when in reality, according to the writers Lou Gramm and Mick Jones of Foreigner, it actually isn't about any of that. You see, Lou Gramm, the vocalist, and Mick Jones, the guitarist of Foreigner, were a team that wrote together. They wrote most of Foreigner's songs. And so they give us the origin story in some interviews. But they're slightly different from each other, so let's do Lou Gramm's first. The truth about the song is its origins are actually connected to an ice hockey game. You heard me right. The details about this origin story are mainly all the same. However, some small changes depending on who the story comes from are obvious, to say the least. Now, of course, since it's been a few years since this song was released, there's obviously going to be some discrepancies because 40 something years is a long time to remember all the tiny details of one particular event. According to Lou Gramm, back in late 1977, the group was working on putting together the Double Vision album, their second album. They hadn't quite completed all the songs yet and were still writing the music. They had just started recording the song, but didn't quite have a title for it yet. And back during that time, Lou Gramm was a season ticket holder for the New York Rangers ice hockey team. That year, the Rangers made it to the Stanley Cup Finals, and they were playing against the Philadelphia Flyers. Lou Gramm wanted to watch the game, so he taped an 8-inch TV inside the vocal booth where he was recording at, and he had the game playing on it. While he was singing, he would have the volume turned down, but he kept his eyes on the screen so he could still watch the game. When they would stop playing and recording the music, he would go and he would turn the volume back up a little so he could hear the game. At one point, while they were in between recording sessions and they were just watching the game had stopped because a player from the Flyers named Dave Schultz had skated in front of the Rangers goalie, John Davidson, elbowed him in the face, and knocked him out. He was then helped off the ice and replaced with the second string goalie. Every so often during the rest of the game, they would announce that they were still waiting for an update on Davidson's condition. Eventually, they finally came out and said that he probably wouldn't be coming back. Even though he had been knocked out by an elbow to the face mask, he didn't have a concussion. However, he did happen to be suffering from double vision. When Lou Gramm heard the announcers say that term, that phrase over the speakers, he liked the way it sounded, and he decided to use it as the title of the song. But that's the story according to an interview given by singer Lou Gramm. He was only one of the two people that participated in writing the song. The other was guitarist Mick Jones, and his account is slightly different. So, let's talk about Mick Jones's version. Why don't we? And then later we'll see how the two compare. According to Mick Jones, back in late 1977, he was an avid New York Rangers fan. One day, while they were working on the Double Vision album, he and Lou Gramm went to an ice hockey game. They went to the 1977 Stanley Cup playoffs to watch the New York Rangers play in the game. During the game, the Rangers goalie, John Davidson, was taken off the rink and removed from the game because he had taken a hit and gotten a concussion. Later, the announcers came over the speakers and said that he was suffering from what was known as double vision. Now, Jones had never heard that term before, and he thought it sounded interesting. So he remembered it for later. Eventually, that term that he heard at an ice hockey game and thought was cool led to the creation of and title for today's song, Double Vision. Both Mick Jones and Lou Gramm have similar stories, but if you listen, they also have differences in their stories as well. You see, in Graham's version, he was watching the Stanley Cup Finals on a TV he had in his recording booth. In Jones's version, he and Graham had actually gone to watch the game in person. However, it was just a playoff game and not the finals themselves. In both versions, the Rangers goalie, John Davidson, takes a hit to his face mask and is removed from the game. Later, his status is announced over the PA, stating that he doesn't have a concussion, but is suffering from double vision. In Graham's version, they had already started recording the song, but didn't have a title for it yet. In Jones's version, it wasn't written until after the game. Both guys used the term double vision that they heard during the game as the title for the song after hearing it said during the game. Now, even though these two stories are similar but different, you can still look up the actual information and the dates and everything to confirm the story and iron out all those details. And I went ahead and did that for you. So, I was thinking, let's step into it and straighten everything out for a minute. You can look up the actual dates and information for these two stories. The New York Rangers have a record of the games that they've played. The Stanley Cup still has the information for the 1977-78 season. And John Davidson was a real goalie for the New York Rangers, who has since become an announcer due to injuries during the games. Because the two stories told by Lou Gramm and Mick Jones of Foreigner were so different from each other, I went ahead and acquired the actual information from the official sources since the stories were so different. The game that they watched, whether it was on a TV, in a recording studio, or in person at the rink itself, it was not played in late 1977, nor was it against the Philadelphia Flyers. It also wasn't the Stanley Cup Finals either. According to the information gathered from the New York Rangers themselves, because that season is online, as well as the records for the Stanley Cup 1977-78 season. The Stanley Cup, which is essentially the Super Bowl for ice hockey, happens in 4 rounds. They start with the preliminary playoffs, then move through the quarterfinals to the semifinals, and then to the finals themselves. That year's first round, the preliminaries, had 4 matchups. Each of these matchups played multiple games against each other until one of the 2 teams had 2 wins. The team with 2 wins would then move on to the next round. These games took place during the middle of April 1978. The game that Lou Gramm and Mick Jones watched was actually the last of the 4 matchups, according to the bracket placement at least. The games all happened on the same days, for the preliminary round of the 1978 Stanley Cup. Since the song wasn't released as a single until September of that year, plus they were still recording the music for this album from March through May of that year, according to the details for this album. Recording this album in May and watching the game in April, still a possibility. Both versions of the story told by Lou Gramm and Mick Jones say that John Davidson was removed from the game because he took a hit to the face mask. Graham's version, however, says that he was elbowed in the face by a player from the other team. Davidson, however, says that what hit him on his mask was actually the puck, not an elbow. He said that the puck hit him directly on his mask quite hard, and it shook him up to the point where he had to be removed. Later, announcers Jim Gordon and Bill Chadwick told the crowd that he didn't have a concussion, but was suffering from double vision. Both versions of the story told by Lou Gramm and Mick Jones of Foreigner are true. They just get some of the details a little mixed up. Whichever one you like the best, be it Graham's version, Jones's version, or the version with the actual details mixed into it, I'd say just pick and go with that one. Once you add the real details in it and clean it up a little bit, the story goes that in the middle of April, because the game was April 11th, 13th, and 15th. In the middle of April 1978, Lou Gramm and Mick Jones went to watch the New York Rangers play against the Buffalo Sabres in the preliminary round, the first round of the Stanley Cup for that year. The teams played 3 games against each other, the only one of the 4 matchups to play more than 2. And during one of these 3 games was the one that the 2 riders went and watched. During the game in the middle of April, the Rangers goalie, John Davidson, takes a hit to the face mask, gets removed to the game because they think he's got a concussion. He later tells, and it's announced over the PA, that he is suffering from double vision. Hearing this term over the intercom during the game, the 2 songwriters working on music for the next album like the term and decide to use it for their next song. eventually spawning the song Double Vision, which is the title track for this album and one of their most popular hits. But more or less, the fact remains the same. The song, which a majority of people interpret as being about drugs, is in reality actually about a state of altered vision called double vision. This term, to the two writers at least, came from an ice hockey game where the goalie took a hit to the head just a little too hard. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any other cool stories, or maybe some interesting facts about songs or albums, let me know. I will certainly look into them. But in the meantime, let me know if you like this video. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. I am Brandon. This has been Vinyl Tales, where we spin tales about vinyl. I will see you next time, and until then, have a good day.